Ambassador Stith is now chairperson of the African Presidential Leadership Center, divides his time between South Africa, Dar es Salaam, and the United States. Ambassador, it's lovely to have you in studio. Thank you very much.
Thank you. A pleasure to be with you this evening.
And I'm imagining watching the elections from afar. Pretty much you've been in Joburg for this period. What are your thoughts on the way it's unfolding?
Well, clearly this is unprecedented in terms of the closeness of the election. With all of the talk in the lead up to the election about voter suppression, it's been heartening to see that over 160 million Americans have voted in this election, which is also unprecedented. The other thing is the commentary, post-election. The focus is on the closeness, on the extent to which we're polarized in America. But the real interesting subtext is that ultimately I think this election is going to be defined by the lockdown. If you look at Nevada, for example, the former Vice President Biden is clinging on to a lead of around 7,000 votes. Hillary Clinton took Nevada in 2016 by 27,000 votes. Now, when you look at the impact of the lockdown on Las Vegas and on Nevada as a whole, it's been profound. 206,000 people have been displaced in terms of their jobs by the lockdown. They're hotel workers, they're casino workers, they're people who work for the airlines. And these people want the lockdown to be over. It's not a convenience, an inconvenience, having to wear a mask or social distance. It's, I can't pay the rent and I can't put food on the table. And I think the closeness of the numbers in Nevada reflect that. And I think that when we do the post-mortem for the election, we'll find that this was a factor all across the country.
That's a fascinating angle because many people have been dismayed at just how close the election is, for a lot of Democrats certainly, but around the world, especially here in South Africa, we look at the election, we look at the racial tones that Donald Trump brings to so many things that he does, and it's quite distressing. It seems to be quite an indictment on the American people, but you're suggesting that perhaps people might have voted for Trump because they see him as not a fan of the lockdowns, and he might push them out of it quicker.
Right. Well, in the last debate, the last presidential debate, he hung the label of lockdown champion on Vice President Biden, and unfortunately, his response was not clear and cogent in that regard. We do a good job of hiding poor people in the United States, but there are about 50 million people who are categorized as poor or working poor. Then you layer on top of that people in the sectors like the hospitality sector, the gaming sector, the airlines. There are a lot of people who are suffering in America because of the lockdown, and we can't get to recovery until we get past lockdown.
Yeah.
And so when you looked at the exit polling and the issues that were most important to people, for Trump voters or Biden voters, the coronavirus, containing the coronavirus, is not at the top.
I think one thing that is clear is whoever takes it, it does look increasingly like it might be Biden, but we know that Trump is challenging. The role of leadership will be crucial. It seems a very polarized country. You were ambassador, U.S. ambassador, in 1998 in Dar es Salaam after the August bombing at the U.S. embassy there. The role of a strong leader in a time of crisis is absolutely crucial, and that is a lot of the work that you do today. What leadership challenge is there? What does the new leader need to do? Because this is a country polarized along racial lines in many ways, but also facing terrible economic challenges.
First, let me say that was a very insightful question and point that you just raised. Folks have tended to focus on the coronavirus crisis as a public health problem. And it's really been a problem of crisis management. And that's where Donald Trump failed first and foremost. That was the original sin. That instead of pulling the world together, which had been done relative to previous coronaviruses, he attempted to politicize it coming out of the box and attempted to use it to isolate China. And, viruses know no boundaries. no borders. And so you can't pit one country off against another and expect to come up with the kind of comprehensive policy you need to contain that virus. Coming out of the box, if I'm assuming we'll be calling him President-elect Biden sometime within the next week or so, if he is going to exert the kind of leadership that the country needs and the world needs, he's going to have to come out of the box and say he's going to do everything he needs to do and can do to end the lockdown. That's got to be number one. And secondly, and related to that, he needs to convene leadership from around the world. We need a global consensus about how to deal with the coronavirus. And I think Africans have a profound role to play in that conversation. Yeah, I was just in Tanzania, and life is pretty close to normal in Tanzania. And Magufuli, who took a lot of heat early on, did not institute a hard lockdown. They did social distancing. They did the mask-wearing protocols. But right now, as I said, life is back to normal. Tanzania's economy is projected to grow at a bare minimum of 2.6% in 2020. Some estimate it might be as much as 4.7%. Tanzania in July was declared by the World Bank a middle-income country 5 years ahead of schedule.
Wow.
Folks need to be talking to John Magufuli about how he did, what he did, because the characteristics between Tanzania and, say, a South Africa are much more similar than South Africa and the United States.
And it's such an interesting point you make. At this moment, our president is considering what to do with our rise in our numbers, and it has to be considered incredibly carefully. I have to ask you one last question. There have been strong ties between the USA and South Africa since 1994. Does it really matter whether it's Joe Biden or Donald Trump for the next four in terms of that relationship?
Well, you know, clearly when President Trump declared that Africa was a continent full of blank hole
but the reality is, but the reality is millions and millions of dollars in aid and support still comes to Africa from the USA.
Well, but you know, whose president does make a difference. You know, during the Clinton years, we made a conscientious decision that we were going to shift from just aid to trade. The Africa Growth and Opportunity Act came out of that. George W. Bush had probably the most comprehensive Africa policy of any U.S. president, with the increase in funding for PEPFAR, the Africa Millennium Challenge thing, which resulted in a host of infrastructure projects across the continent, the national security issues that were addressed with the establishment of AFRICOM. So who is president does matter. I think under a Biden administration, we'll see a change. I anticipate that we'll have some people appointed to ambassadorships in the State Department who get Africa and who will want to make sure that our relationship is reflective of the respect that we have for the continent. And I'd add one other thing, that, you know, Africa has the potential to be the world's next global factory, given the youth of its population. It has 20th century minerals like graphite, which is essential to the production of lithium-ion batteries. There's actually more graphite and lithium-ion batteries than lithium. And so, you know, it's those sorts of things that position Africa to play a very concrete and constructive role. And I think the critical thing is that when African leaders show up at the table, they need to come with more than an appetite. They need to come with a menu.
Out of every crisis comes opportunity.
Yes.
Let's hope the opportunity is here for Africa. Thank you so much for joining me in studio. That was former U.S. Ambassador to Tanzania, Charles Stith. Ambassador Stith is now the chairperson of the African Presidential Leadership Center.